Today, the Word of God presents us with a foundational reflection that has been part of the church's constant frontal memory for centuries because of how valuable it is. In fact, it occurs three times, so to speak. Once is the actual historical occurrence. The second is the recounting in the psalm of that event. And then the third is that same event is recounted in the New Testament. That's how significant that it is, because it is a microcosm of essentially of the entirety of the spiritual life. And so one of the ways the church recounts and remembers this event is to have it in what's called the invitatory psalm in the Liturgy of the Hours. So if you pray the Liturgy of the Hours, every single day you open up with an invitatory psalm, and there's only three options, and the one the church favors that she puts as normative and then allows alternatives if you want to deviate is Psalm 95. So what is happening in Psalm 95 that is so important? The psalmist is recounting in a nutshell God's experience of his people that ultimately ends in his inability to help them. It opens up by saying, "Oh, that today you would hear his voice, harden not your hearts." Now remember, the name Israel is the one who wrestles with God. So from God's perspective, he's saying, please just listen to me. So you already have this image of a child who's just lacks docility, just won't do anything, is so uncooperative. And yet that's what happens. I mean, think of everything that God does for them. He manifests all of these plagues in front of their eyes, the turning the water into blood and the frogs and the darkness and the taking of the firstborn son. And step by step, just as Moses is articulating all these things are going to happen, then the impossible happens where they actually get out of Egypt. Then he parts the water and they walk all the way through to the other side. I mean, things in their midst that no one has ever seen, that not even the Egyptian gods could perform. They see all of this. They see the manna. They see the quail. They see God conquering other tribes and nations that are coming against them on their path. They're seeing all of it happened. But they harden their hearts and they doubt. So he says, today that you would hear his voice, harden not your hearts. And so the psalmist says, come, let us bow down and worship. Let us kneel before the Lord who made us. For he is our God, and we are the people, the shepherd, the flock he guides. Why? Because that's not what they did. They finally get to Sinai. Moses disappears for like a hot minute to get some coffee, and they make a golden calf. And they start worshiping that instead. Oh, that today you would hear his voice. Harden not your hearts as at Meribah, as in the day of Massa in the desert. What happened in the desert? These other people came against them and they were having to fight for their salvation. And they were terrified. And God said, have I not been with you all this time? And they were like, he's not going to help us. He's not going to save us. And they pushed back. And yet he did. He said, where your fathers tempted me, they tested me, though they had seen my works. 40 years I was wearied of that generation. I said, this people's heart goes astray. They do not know my ways. So here's the judgment. Therefore I swore in my anger, they shall not enter into my rest. And every single living Israelite that followed Moses out of Egypt, not a single one of them stepped foot in the Holy Land. They all died in the desert. The only ones that made it to the Holy Land were their descendants who weren't a part of it, who were born into it. And even then they resisted when Joshua wanted to take them over, and they were like, well, I don't know. After a little reconnaissance, it's a land filled with giants. We must have looked like grasshoppers to them. They're going to crush us. It's that same absence of faith. It's that same caving into fear. And these endanger the spiritual life, which is why not only was this enshrined in the Psalms, but now the author to the letter to the Hebrews, who's writing roughly around 40 years after Jesus ascends and all that's done, is telling the Christians, Don't fall into this trap. Your salvation is not guaranteed. It's guaranteed if you remain faithful, if you don't surrender to fear, if you persevere, and you have all the evidence that you need. You've seen the resurrection. You were there when he multiplied the loaves. Don't forget these things. So if you receive opposition, cling to the faith, and that way you will enter into God's rest. And as Christians on our own pilgrimage, we have to hear these things again and again and again, because we live in a world that would love to just dampen, weaken, beat, threaten, or kill our faith. And yet it's the most important thing we have, and nothing, and for no reason should we ever let it go.